Ladies and gentlemen, Barry Burton's, it's finally happening. Ever since the Resident Evil 4 remake landed a few years ago, fans have been endlessly debating which entry Capcom would modernize next. And honestly, can you blame them? These remakes are practically a money-printing machine. And with over 3 decades of Resident Evil history to pull from, Capcom isn't exactly short on material. Would they revisit the original Resident Evil yet again and send us back to the Spencer Mansion for round 3? Or would they push the timeline forward with Resident Evil 5 and finally deliver that legendary, boulder-punching showdown we've been waiting nearly 15 years to see? Well, not quite. At least not yet. Instead, what we're getting is a full remake of Code Veronica, the often overlooked Dreamcast entry that first arrived way back in the year 2000. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man. For those unfamiliar, the story follows Claire Redfield as she desperately searches for her missing brother Chris. After the catastrophe in Raccoon City, her investigation eventually leads her to Umbrella's headquarters somewhere in Europe. Exactly where in Europe? Who knows? Who cares? The game certainly doesn't. Before long, Claire is captured, imprisoned, and shipped off to Rockford Island in the South Atlantic, presumably, because it's rocky and happens to have a fort. Right. Anyway, before Claire even gets the chance to settle into prison life, the entire facility comes under attack by a mysterious force. A sympathetic guard releases her from captivity, and she's suddenly forced to fight her way through the usual collection of zombies, bioweapons, and nightmare fuel in the hope of escaping the island and finding Chris. Of course, this being Resident Evil, nothing stays straightforward for very long. Before you know it, Claire finds herself dealing with cross-dressing, mildly unhinged aristocrats, an enemy who really should have stayed dead, and what might genuinely be the most awkward romance subplot since Rise of Skywalker. Pretty standard Resident Evil material, in a weird sort of way. Now, judging by the slick new trailer revealed at Summer Game Fest, Capcom seems determined to ground the experience in something a little more believable this time around. Gone is the over-the-top, John Woo-inspired opening sequence where Claire casually takes on an army of elite Umbrella operatives and somehow survives an attack helicopter. As entertaining as that introduction was, it did require you to accept that Claire transformed from an ordinary college student with zero combat experience into a one-woman action movie protagonist in the span of a few months. Laughter, taking its place as a quieter, more restrained, and frankly more believable introduction. Claire tracks Chris to a slightly rundown apartment he's been renting in Paris. The unsettling landlady is more than willing to let her inside, but Chris is nowhere to be found. And before Claire can enjoy the local hospitality or sample any fine French biscuits, she's drugged, knocked unconscious, and abducted by an unknown attacker. Wow. They really nailed the modern tourist experience of Paris, didn't they? Anyway, the teaser remains pretty secretive when it comes to story details, gameplay systems, and character reveals, but as a general direction, I actually like what I'm seeing. And if any classic Resident Evil title deserves a second chance, it's probably Code Veronica. For me, it always felt like the strange middle child of the franchise. A game trapped between two eras, never fully committing to either one. It lacked the atmosphere, artistry, and meticulous detail of the older entries with their beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds, yet it also fell short of the fast-paced action and intense gameplay that Resident Evil 4 would later perfect. Technically, it was the first fully 3D Resident Evil, but it was also heavily restricted by the Dreamcast's hardware limitations. Hence the endless fog, darkness effects, uninspired textures, simplified environments, and carefully disguised shortcuts designed to keep the engine running smoothly. The cameras remained mostly fixed as well, only occasionally shifting or tracking the player's movement. In many ways, it sacrificed visual quality to create the illusion of freedom, without truly delivering the benefits that freedom should have provided. Then there's the story. Up until that point, Resident Evil was largely rooted in science fiction, horror, bioweapons, corporate corruption, secret research programs, espionage, catastrophic experiments gone horribly wrong. Sure, things occasionally got weird, but they were still grounded in believable locations, organizations, and characters with understandable motivations. Umbrella was easy to grasp, a pharmaceutical giant presenting a respectable public image while secretly conducting reckless experiments behind closed doors. It was science gone wrong. Even Albert Weskier's bizarre plan to lure his own team into a zombie-infested mansion at least came from human greed and ambition. His morality might have been flexible to the point of snapping, but he was still recognizably human. He wanted power. He wanted more for himself. Code, Veronica took a very different route. Suddenly we had crumbling aristocratic dynasties, ancient family histories, bloodline obsessions, inherited legacies, and creatures that often felt like they belonged in a gothic horror novel rather than a Resident Evil game. It was a dramatic shift in tone, and one that never quite meshed with what the series had established before. Making matters worse were the famously hammy performances, painfully cliché dialogue, and characters so absurd they managed to stand out even by Resident Evil standards. My apologies, but I cannot let you escape now. Alfred, cross-dressing freak. Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced those lines are going to land particularly well with modern audiences. The game has always felt like that slightly uncomfortable relative nobody really discusses. The one connected to some questionable family history, who gets acknowledged from a distance but mysteriously never receives an invitation to family gatherings. And honestly, that's exactly why I think Code Veronica stands to gain the most from a complete remake. Because despite everything I've criticized here, I genuinely believe there's a fantastic Resident Evil game hidden underneath all of it, buried beneath 25 years of outdated design decisions, technical limitations, and strange creative choices is something worth saving. Maybe this remake is finally the chance to uncover it. Maybe after all this time, Code Veronica can finally earn its place back in the Resident Evil family. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.